The concept of town design in video games is a subject that's also interested me for a while. Almost as much as combat design. Yes, this is going to be another one of those things where I look at shit no one cares about but me, just like the role of video game titles and title screens in their narrative, but this is a bit different. While not at the forefront of your mind when you think of your favorite games, I've little doubt names like Chocobo Village, Pallet Town, Goldenrod City, San Andreas, Clock Town, Inaba, Midgar, and Silent Hill resonate with you on some level. Despite their more passive role in the games, a well-designed town in a video game will stick with you. While I'd love to do a more general look into different design philosophies behind town design and what constitutes good town design in their respective category for a single video, I unfortunately only have footage of Metroid and Monster Hunter at time of writing, and I don't feel like rushing through literally 50 billion towns and games for the sake of time, so instead I thought it'd be fun to look at some examples of single design philosophies and how they're being adapted and evolved in different series. For this particular video, we'll be looking at the town and hub designs for the Monster Hunter franchise, which, in my opinion, sports some of the best town design I've seen in any game series. That probably sounds a bit hyperbolic, and maybe it is, but I'm going to try and explain it as best I can. Being a JRPG, loosely, it goes without saying that the series would begin by adapting village design of other JRPGs. Many JRPGs at the time followed the direction of the 2D counterparts of earlier consoles. Obviously, the viewing angle of these towns in old JRPGs was fixed to top-down due to hardware limitations, so towns had to be designed to convey as much to the player as possible within a single screen. This isn't strictly true, but it was a common enough trait among most JRPGs to at least be seen in their contemporaries to this day. Many of the earliest adaptations to 3D would maintain the fixed viewing angle seen in the retro gaming era, maintaining this design philosophy, which I'll be referring to from now on as Field of View Design, or FOV design for short. Until the recently released Monster Hunter World, FOV design has been a consistent component of Monster Hunter town and hub design. But before I dig into the aesthetics of each town in Monster Hunter, there is one thing that makes the town design of Monster Hunter stand high above many other JRPGs, and other JRPGs with this design philosophy in general. If you've been following my Monster Hunter series videos, you'll know that the game has a strong emphasis on combat, and the town and hubs do not waste this. Every shop serves a purpose that ties directly into the core gameplay in a meaningful way. The armory can get you started as a new hunter, so you're equipped for your first few hunts until you're able to gather your own materials. The blacksmith will use gathered materials throughout the game to craft new and stronger weapons and armor, alongside offering upgrades. Eating is a core component of battle preparation, as each meal offers buffs that give a player an edge at the start of every hunt. And the general store offers many useful materials that can be used in crafting potions and other materials that can't be found in the field or farmed. And farming allows you to grow natural crafting materials without distracting yourself from your questing. The entirety of Monster Hunter town design revolves around hunters, and it's interwoven into every aspect of gameplay. While performing occasional upgrades to the best gear and restocking potions is a common component to any JRPG, most stores and those end up falling to the wayside as you begin to find all the best equipment is out in the field. A pitfall that makes most towns and RPGs busy work rather than an engaging part of the core experience. And I think what really makes this work for Monster Hunter is that unlike these other JRPG towns, the best, and indeed only equipment, is crafted in town. It's not found in a chest or from a loot drop, but from the materials you gather from the monsters you defeat. It ties directly to the core gameplay loop of hunting and crafting rather brilliantly. Now, there is one other important element to RPG town design, but we'll get into that as we dive into the aesthetics and layouts of town design. Now, let me preface this by saying that I'll be covering the town design separately from hub design, as they possess some fundamental and massive changes to the design philosophy found in towns. Additionally, I won't be examining parts of the town that exist behind separate loading screens, because I don't classify that as the town proper. That's a pretty arbitrary decision on my part, but this is going to be a long one anyway, so it's good for all of us. Mostly me. Towns are small, meant for solo hunting. As a result, most of their designs and layouts are more concise. Like I said earlier, the point of FOD design is to communicate as much of information to the player in a single screen as possible, and while I generally think Monster Hunter's villages are the pinnacle of this design philosophy, they're not without their shortcomings. So let's get started with Monster Hunter Generation 1. Monster Hunter 1 and Portable First, Kokoto Village is the first and the weakest of the village designs we'll be looking at. Aesthetically, it's got a very traditional RPG look to it, but the first thing that may pop out at you about the design is that there is a lot of negative space that only serves to pad out the size of the village. Despite Kokoto being relatively small due to the camera positioning and the flat design of the village itself, it makes it feel large and rather disappointingly empty. There's even this curious little area in the east wing of town that doesn't have anything of note in it, save for the hero sword and a Poogie. Apart from that weird hanger-on, Monster Hunter Generation and Double Cross fix a lot of this village's problems, and that was simply done by you changing the camera angle. The camera is now pulled back far enough and tilted low enough to allow you to see more of the village at once, while reducing the apparent excess of negative space that Generation 1's iteration had. Now, I was debating on whether or not to even include this village, since not everyone has gotten to play the original Monster Hunter DOS, what with it having never been released outside Japan, but fuck it, we're talking about Jumbo Village. Right off the bat, this village has a lot more personality to it than its predecessor. It has a more tribalistic and tropical look to contrast the more traditional design aesthetics of the first game, and I dig it. It's a nice way to spice things up. On the design front, it's an improvement over Kokoto as well. There's no pointless hanger-on area wasting town space that isn't behind a loading screen and therefore technically out of town, and the camera is much farther back. The terrain is still flat and the village itself is spread out pretty far horizontally, so seeing everything in the village still takes some legwork. But an improvement's an improvement, and this also signifies the moment that Capcom's care for the growth of the franchise shows through. I mean, just look at this cute little character detail as this blacksmith and armorer running between their two shops. It's adorable. Also, you can fish here. Didn't know where to work that in. That's just a thing you can do here that you can't do in any of the other villages. That said, the next village in the second generation is the most well-known and arguably the most popular. Kept you waiting, huh? Pokke Village. Yes, this town is good. It's good! I mean, the last two were fine by Monster Hunter standards, but this one is good! The village has a nice homey feel. Maybe it's my fondness for mountainous areas and the cold, but the entire feel of the village is just very comfortable. It's certainly one of my favorite villages, but it's not just aesthetics that raise this one above the previous ones. If you'll recall, one of my common complaints about both Jumbo and Kokoto were their FOV design suffered due to the camera angle and flat design of the village itself. Well, Pokke resolves both of those problems. Now, Pokke is technically bigger than its predecessors in terms of scale, but thanks to the incline of the mountain and the camera positioning, it's able to create a picturesque landscape from the village's entrance. And the way the village curves ever so slightly into itself allows the player to view the entire village in a single screen. This is one of the major contributing factors to the village's coziness. It has its problems, but we'll get to them as they're corrected in later generations. Which brings us to Monster Hunter Tri and Moga Village. There's not much to say about Moga Village, unfortunately. It's very similar structurally to Jumbo Village from Monster Hunter DOS, even carrying over the more tribalistic design. The only noteworthy changes are the tighter town design, making effective use of negative space by putting everything closer together, as well as better signposting. One problem with Generation 1 and 2 was that while the village design themselves was largely distant to very good, in the case of Pokke, they all suffered from a lack of signposting with their shops. There's no immediate visual indicator as to what vendor did what in those iterations of the series, save for the blacksmith and Jumbo. Moga Village doesn't have great signposting for the shops, but it's a cut above the previous entries by a huge margin. What really stepped up the design in the third generation, once again, was from a handheld entry of the series, in this case, Monster Hunter Portable 3rd, which was also never released outside of Japan. But hey, Yukumo Village is in Monster Hunter Generations on the West, so I guess that's alright then. Yukumo is a popular village in the series, and with good reason. If you're a fan of a traditional Japanese aesthetic, it hits the nail on the head. At this point in the series, I'd say this game's town probably has the most visual personality compared to its predecessors. More color, more signposting, and apparently in the PSP version of Yukumo, there's even a hot spring that actually gives you buffs for your quests, giving the village some extra personal flair. On the design front, Yukumo tries to take the town design concept of Pokke from a different angle. Literally. Instead of designing the town to descend as it goes with a camera angle that looks down upon it, Yukumo builds the city up in front of you, with the camera at an upward angle. All the essential shops are at the lowest level of the village, and with the quest giver and house on the second level, creating a much cleaner divide between where you'll be doing your quest prep work and where the questing is done. You know, as I've been writing this, I've realized that the handheld entries all sport the best village designs in the series. I wonder why that is. The main series and the portable series have different teams behind them, so maybe there's a division in design philosophy there? Or so I think! But the 4th generation, which was released on handheld exclusively, includes arguably the best designed village in the entire series. Yes, I'm talking about Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate, specifically Valluvar. I'll be talking about the other villages in this game as well. Yes, there's more than one, but Valluvar is going to be the focus. Valluvar, to me, is the peak of village design in the franchise. While I'll grant that I do prefer Yukumo's aesthetic, Valluvar is pretty visually appealing in its own right. It's got a very cozy and homey feel like Pokke, but with a warmer color palette, and I dig it. What sets this village, and well, I guess all the villages in 4 Ultimate apart from the earlier entries, is the signposting. Now, signposting doesn't necessitate that the indicators for the shops be a part of the architecture, and while that can certainly be a part of it, and is in this case, another important aspect is having memorable character designs. And the character design in Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate could rival even Nintendo. Just look at some of these. It makes everything about the shops drip with personality, in addition to making them immediately identifiable. And this signposting applies to every single village. Well, almost every village. And how it's done is interesting. In this game, every major shop is a part of a traveling caravan, so the strong signposting carries over to most every village as a result. Now you might be thinking, Link, that sounds incredible! So why is Valluvar the best village and not the rest? And as you might expect, that's where the layout and camera angles come in. Oh come on, you should have seen it coming. The villages of Harth and Cheeko Sands both suffer from the same issues as Jumbo and Moga Village, but with stronger signposting. Cathar is basically Monster Hunter Generations' version of Kokoto, but with more aesthetically pleasing design, and Dundorma. Oh, Dundorma. This village, or city technically, existed before 4 Ultimate as a hub area in Monster Hunter DOS, but in this game it's a single-player town, and it really suffers because of it. The camera angle is largely top-down, so it suffers from the same poor use of negative space as I mentioned with Kokoto. Though, given that it's adapted from a city intended for multiple players, I'll cut it some slack. Good for multiplayer, bad for single player. So, back to Valluvar. What elevates it above all the other main villages of Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate is the camera. Now, unlike Pokke or Yukumo, Valluvar is flat. There's no incline up or down for the camera to position itself for, so they opted for a simple, straightforward, horizontal camera that can show everything in the town at once dead on. If not for the caravan shops dripping with personality from every bodily orifice, this might be a negative, as this is superficially less interesting on the camera angle side of things. But signposting and camera angles go hand in hand when it comes to making good town design. Had the shops in Pokke or Yukumo had this much personality, I've little doubt they would have easily trumped Valluvar's design. Additionally, 4 Ultimate adds the trader to replace the farm from the previous games that I didn't mention earlier. While the farms are an essential aspect of any Monster Hunter town, I think it's a better quality of life improvement to have it as a trader that can be accessed from the town proper. And lastly, for the 4th generation villages, we got Burna. And Burna is odd. Aesthetically, it's pretty chill. You got moofas wandering around you can hug, and that's nice. And the scenery is nice, but the signposting is surprisingly lackluster after 4 Ultimate. The blacksmith and armorer is just about the only immediately identifiable instance of signposting, despite it being at the back of the village. Curiously, the quest giver and cook are located right front and center, but weirdly just blend into the background. Their placement next to one another is certainly good for convenience, I guess, but the design is still inferior to 4 Ultimate. While 4 Ultimate had the quest giver and cook located at opposite ends of the village of Valluvar, the cook was located near the quest gate, which is your most likely destination if you've just eaten anyway. And immediately going into another quest after completing another one isn't unheard of, so the quest giver being right next to the entrance makes sense. Burna is also spread out more horizontally with more negative space, creating a similar scenario to Cathar and Kokoto. It's a shame too. After the masterful design with Valluvar as the main village, this just feels like a step back. But, they can bring back the Moofas. I won't judge. Now, hubs. Hubs are kind of an oddity. In Monster Hunter 1 Dose and Try, the hubs were sprawling cities, while the handheld entries, as well as Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate, had smaller, more personable hubs. I can't actually get footage of the likes of Mindguard and the original Dundorma or Locklack City from the first 3 Monster Hunter games due to them having been shut down some time after I really got into the series. They're completely inaccessible, and I don't think it's entirely fair for me to judge them based on speculation. Monster Hunter World looks like it's going for a similar big sprawling city type deal for its hub, so I'll update my thoughts on those whenever I get around to writing my critique on that. No, what we'll be talking about instead are the hubs of the handheld Monster Hunters. Though we're not going to be tackling these ones individually because they're pretty samey design-wise. Most hubs consist of just the quest giver, the canteen, a shop, and equipment or item boxes. These hubs are kinda drab visually, with the exception of Tanzia from 3 Ultimate and the Hunter's Hub from Generations. They're as big as they need to be to support 4 players and don't really do anything remarkable design-wise. They're functional, and you know, that's fair. The FOV design has more in common with Jumbo and Moga Village, and it works far better here. The only downside was that they would disconnect you from online play if you wanted to change your equipment. Fortunately, this was fixed in 3 Ultimate with the addition of a side area for the smithy and management. So, from this analysis of villages and hubs, we've learned that field of view design benefits from concise visual design, demonstrating the ability to show all of the town has to offer in a single screen. However, FOD design does not necessitate that everything be visible at all times, only being essential in your initial view of the town. FOV design and town design in general can be strengthened by strong character design and good signposting. Hubs obviously differ in that they need to be larger by necessity and therefore can't be shown all at once, so FOV design doesn't really apply as well. Now, I've got one more video for Monster Hunter left in the series where I'll be critiquing Monster Hunter World on the PS4 Pro. Seems like the perfect send-off to a series featuring the history of design in the series, so I hope you all enjoyed this video and that it lit a fire under you, and hopefully you'll enjoy the last video in this series as well. I'm really happy to have you all watch. The last few weeks have really rocked my world and I'm super grateful, so have a great night, you lovelies.